Okay, I'm going to share something with you which has to do with the assignment for Monday. And I think it's better if I just do it now so you can think about it as we talk in case questions come up. Okay, everyone can see my screen, right?
What?
Talking to my students. Everyone can see my screen, correct? Yep. Okay, so this has to do with Make 2D, which I've already seen in some of your Rhino files. Anyone not know? So this is a clipping plane that you see here, right? And this clipping plane allows you to see through the. Can everyone see my mouse? Yep, good. Okay, so the clipping plane allows you to see through the objects. And part of the assignment for Monday is going to be to make both three-dimensional and two-dimensional things. Because before the final review, we have to get to the point where we're making, I like to call them FORE plans, because they're not quite plans, but they're the things that are leading to the plans. And essentially what they are, they're cuts through these three-dimensional objects. So the basic gist is that there's a plane that there's a clipping plane that is cutting through whatever is on your site. You have to be extremely good with layers from this point forward. I know that you already heard this, but it's really important to be really organized with your work. So the clipping plane is going to give you the possibility to then take these images and make 2D out of them. And you can see here the make 2D set of files. So what's nice about it is that they all get bundled together into one area. And you can see that there are subfolders, but you can just turn off the make 2D, and then everything on there turns off. And then for the Miro board, we're still going to use our 69 proportion. And the 69 proportion is going to be what you're going to be using in the presentation for the 1/3 review as well. But then to make up the extra stuff in the Miro board, there's like a band. And I know that some of you already mentioned that you were really anxious to put some text on there so that people knew what they were talking about. So that this is going to be the general the general layout of your Miro board. So we're gonna come up with a couple of slides in your presentation that are also going to double as a Miro board presentation, right? So that way there is always there's always a slide that also matches your Miro board, and the Miro board is always in your major presentations, your 1/3, your 2/3, and your final. Okay, so that's how we're gonna do it. Just take an 11 by 17 page, take out the 69 proportion, and then whatever's left over is the text. Then you can play around with whether it's like a solid color with white text, or something else. Okay. The important thing about starting to play around with 2D drawings and 3D drawings, and you already saw this in the 3 objects that you've been working with, that they had some 2D lines, some 3D representations, is that you have to keep them on different sides of the board, and because the raw models are in their own layer, you can turn things on and off, you can lock things. Layers in your Rhino file are like file cabinets. If you have all the papers on your table, then you just can't get any work done because you're spending hours just looking for the next piece of paper you need. But if you have everything nicely put away in drawers, you can just shut that drawer, lock it, and you don't have to worry about messing with it, right? And especially because as you move around, you see everything. So something can be, something that's like this in one view will be like this in another view, and then how do you work, right? And then, the other thing that also you might want to consider is, for example, the clipping plane can be in its own layer. right? To sort of keep it organized. Okay, this is a requirement. And you can just start to memorize these four conditions: cut, not cut, furniture, pattern. So those are going to have to do with what you're drawing in your plans for the between now and the end of the semester. But I want you to start working with the line work even when we don't have plans yet. So the exercise for Monday is going to be one of picking certain lines to go into the cut layer, picking certain lines to go into the not cut layer, picking certain lines to go into the furniture layer, and picking certain lines to go into the pattern layer. So good line work has to do with the weight that each line has, and the weight that each line has represents a different spatial condition. Okay. So you have a cut line, which is the thickest line, and the cut line is like your clipping plane, is the place where you cut through that building, and it allows you to position yourself within the three-dimensional space of that building. The not cut line is essentially what you see beyond the cut, because the things that are the other way could be dash lines, but we're not going to get into dash lines yet. But the not cut line is what you see beyond the cut. So say that you have a volume, you cut it, whatever details you see in the back wall, those are the not cut lines. Furniture are things that are items within it, but that are not tied. So for example, you might choose to do a stair. If you're cutting a building and looking down, you might choose to draw a stair in the not cut line, but then a shelf in the furniture line. And what ends up happening is that there's like this dark line, that's the cut, that's the first thing that pops out. Then there's the next darkest, which is the not cut, that's the thing that recedes a little bit. Then there's the furniture, that recedes even more. And pattern, or it's essentially pattern on the floor. Now, you might be thinking, whoa, pattern on the floor. Well, sometimes the way in which the pattern on the floor is articulated helps you and helps us looking at it understand the configurations of your inside-outside space. Sometimes it's used as delineation of inside-outside. Sometimes it's used to show that you're trying to make the sort of dovetail relationship between inside and outside. That's just one example. But pattern can be surprisingly helpful. Pattern is the only one that you may not use in Rhino, because with pattern, you might withhold on the pattern in the Rhino file and add the pattern later when you have it in Illustrator or in InDesign. Okay, so I need to see these 4 layers in your Rhino file, and I need to see those precise 4 line weights. And I'm going to share this PDF with you, so you'll have this PDF as well. Okay. All right. Okay, and then it's time to pick the curves from these objects that you've had as a raw objects, right? Pick the curves from the Make 2D. Now, the curves that come out of the Make 2D process are often terrible line work. They're not good curves. They might be locked inside blocks or groupings that don't allow you to work with it. And so the lines from Make 2D, they have the promise of just making the plan for you. They are liars, pants on fire, because they are terrible line work. You actually have to do quite a bit, because, for example, if you showed the print preview, a lot of those lines would disappear, right? And the reason that they do is because what I've done for you in these layers is let me just hide your videos for a second. for for the raw materials, I'm making those lines no print, and the reason I'm making them no print is so that we know when the lines have moved to the appropriate layer. Does it make sense? In other words, the lines that exist inside the make 2D and inside of all of these should not ever be printed. Only the ones that are the only lines that you print from your Rhino file have to be in cut, not cut, furniture, and pattern, which is why everything else is set as no print. Okay. Here I was working to ungroup some of these lines. So when you make 2D, some of these lines come in groups, and then you have to kind of dig your way through the various ways in which these lines come in. Then finally I get a line isolated, but look at this line. It's a terrible line. Can someone tell me why it's a terrible line?
Too many points.
Yeah, go ahead. Speak all at once. That's great. No, I'm serious. This is fine. Why is
I was going to say, is it because there's too many points?
Yeah, it's too many points, right? Everyone else was trying to say that? Yeah, it's just a terrible, inelegant. We want elegant drawings, which means that if you have a straight line from point A to point B, how many points do you need all at once now? 2. Right. The minute that you start to get, messy geometries like this, which sometimes they come out as little worms, like the tiny little tiny lines when you do make 2D. You have to always budget time to clean up the line work, because make 2D is just the first step in a long process. Okay, and then finally, you replace that. So think of make 2D as giving you the location of where your lines are going to be, but then you're going to have to do your own drawing, which is faster than for the kinds of line work that you're doing. The fastest thing is just go through it, figure out where you want the lines to be, and then make those happen. Okay, then as far as in the assignment, I think I wrote something like, choose some to put in the cut layer, choose some to put in the not cut layer. It doesn't matter. Just make a drawing that has a variety of widths. Maybe you for example in this drawing, maybe you choose that one, and these two as being cut, just to imagine that this could be a potential space. But it has nothing to do with how you're describing the object. It really is just testing out this process. A lot of the work has to do with it sort of cycling back and forth between, the different operations, like the iteration and framing and articulation regarding the work that you've been doing with your Rhino 3D objects. With the 2D objects, it's similar in that way, in that you cut an object, you draw the plan, you present it as 2D, you go back, you cut it again, right? And that's one of the advantages that we have with Rhino, that we can have 3D and 2D in the same place. It means that we can keep going back and finding new ways to make the plan. Okay, now I have my print preview, and I can see more because I've exploded those blocks or ungrouped that line work. Oh no, I don't see more. Sorry. This image behind here is before print preview, but then I say print preview, which basically means I see on my screen what would be printed. In other words, what's in here. And the things that I redrew are printed, but nothing else. So that's the work. It's actually quite a bit of work to make these 2D drawings. But once they're inside here, once you have all your line work organized, and then now I'm talking about when you actually have the plans, once you have your line work organized, then it's a pleasure to work with it. Because if you wanted, for example, to tweak the difference in width between line work, all the cut lines are on the same layer. So you just have to tweak the width of the layer, and suddenly your plan changes. So there's a lot of upfront work that I want you to do in keeping, everything in each file cabinet as it needs to be. But once you have it, it's a tremendously productive machine. You can make all kinds of plans, plan representations with it. Okay, I don't know why I showed you this. I guess to show you that you have to redraw it. Oh, and then you go to the printing of it, and we're going to be printing to PDF. What's wrong with this print window? Why is this bad for line work? Does anyone know?
It's in roster output.
Yes, raster output is the enemy. Can everyone say this? Raster output will make bad things happen. Don't do it. Raster output breaks down those line work into tiny little flaky, yucky things that you don't want in your drawings. You always want to have vector output because we went through the trouble. So you can see here, see all that fuzz? No fuzz. Line work is not a, friendly bunny. No fuzz. Okay, then I've added 2 lines here. So as you're doing your line work, if you want to add line work, in other words, if you have your make 2D lines and then you want to add line work that is not from make 2D, that's allowable, and that will have to be part of the process in making plans as well. Okay, I think I'm just switching layers at this point. Oh, yes, I'm switching layers. So see how now this one is green and this one is blue? That means that the green is in the not cut layer and that the blue is in the cut layer, right? And now all of them are in the cut and not cut layer. Oh, another thing that I wanted to show you, see how this is parallel view and perspective view? If you want to work with perspective view, you can. This is more to do with the view of the objects as 3-dimensionals. But I want to encourage you to do, in fact, let's all do parallel view for a while, because it means that you have a more kind of analytical view even in the 3D objects, okay? So this has to do how you see your 3-dimensional objects. Okay, I think I'm printing, yeah. Okay, now this is about exporting the line work. There are some options for exporting the line works. If you export it as polylines, this is what happens after I exported this one as a polyline, and then it comes out into Illustrator like this. So there are a couple of different ways in which you can bring line work into a board. One is you export what's been selected. If you export it as polylines, then these these become continuous polylines, which are easy to work with. If you export it that way, then it comes in as the color that it had in the layer. Now, here's what I do not want you to do. Okay, so you might think, okay, I'm going to export the lines, but instead of can everyone see my mouse where the blue and the green is? So you might say, oh, I'm going to export the lines and I'm just going to make this black, or even more sinful, dark gray, so that it recedes. Do not do that. I will fail you for that. Okay? No, I won't. I won't fail you for anything. I can't fail you. What am I talking about? But this is super, super important, okay? Line work is not about this column. Line work is about this column, is the print column. So either you export it as a PDF and then it has these print line work already, or you export it as a drawing, as forget what the initials are, the transferable, DXF, right? You export it as a drawing, as a set of lines, And then you have this beautiful, see all these polylines that come into Illustrator? Right? But then you have to change, oh no, this is actually, no, this is the PDF. Sorry. Okay, you either export it as a set of lines, and then you have blue lines and green lines, which means that you then have to select them and change them into black into Illustrator, or you export it as a PDF with polylines. But making sure that when you make your PDF, it's the setting is on the vector line. If this is a lot, don't worry. Anytime that we introduce like a new thing, it means that it's the beginning of working on it several times. So we've now introduced this way of making the 2D line work. Now we're going to be working on it for several days. We're going to be working on it right up to the 1/3 review. Our 1/3 review is going to have 3D images like we've been doing so far. We already have a lot of experience with those. 2D projections, we've also been doing that, right? And in addition, the new thing that we're adding this week is we're going to have this four-section work, this line work that has to do with cutting the object and then making line work from it. But Monday is just the first time. So do as much, if you're going to prioritize something for Monday, make sure you leave yourself enough time to make 2D work from your 3D final, from your 3D model. Does it make sense? So if I were to, guess how much time you should leave, I would say, you can work on it Friday and Saturday as far as, the things that we've already been doing, and then leave a whole day just to do the cuts and the 2D work. Does it make sense? Because that's the thing, that's the new thing. So that's the thing that you should definitely prioritize. Even if you have more 3D work to do, you can always go back and do more 3D work. And that's the other thing that I want you to understand, even beyond the first third review. Just because you're making the 2D drawing, it doesn't mean that you can't go back and make more 3D work that then you make a 2D drawing out of. And if you're within the same range, you can even add to the existing 2D work. So for example, you can have your, this is the object that you want to cut, right? So you still want to tweak it a little bit, you still want to do something more to it, but it's midnight on Saturday and you want to go to bed, and tomorrow you want to do 2D work. So, okay, I haven't tweaked it as much as I want to, but I'm going to make the 2D work. Go ahead and make the 2D work. Now you have the 2D work. Now you go back to it and you tweak it a little. But just because you tweak it a little, it doesn't mean that you can't keep the 2D work that you already have. Maybe you tweak it a little and you bring in new 2D work to the existing 2D work. So that's allowable too. And that could be a way to generate really interesting drawings. For now, you can have a close to but not exact relationship between the 2D work and the 3D objects. So there is a possibility for inventing things when you move to the 2D work. The reason being that the stuff that happens inside, chances are that you're not going to get from the 3D object, right? Chances are that you're going to have to put in additional work into it, because the 3D object has some hints at what's going on inside, but it may be, in some cases, empty, in which case you have to add additional things. Does that make sense? Like the 2D work is not necessarily something that happens at the end of your 3D work, but that you're going back and forth. That would be ideal if you started going 3D, 2D, 3D, 2D, 3D, 2D, okay? Okay. And the last thing that I want to tell you is we are working with 11 by 17. Do I have to? Oh, Donovan. Okay, sorry. Okay, so we're working with 11 by 17 pieces, which means that you're going to have several cuts in the same page. So here you have duplicate that same form, that same dummy form. I've duplicated it a couple of times because what you want to do, you still want to use polylines for sure, but then what I want you to do is I want you to make an 11 by 17 rectangle. Now, does anyone remember what units we're working with here?
Feet.
Feet, yeah. So I made that for you. I gave you that. I wanted you to work in feet, and I want you to start thinking of this modeling space as being quote unquote real. Now, we're going to make a sheet of paper that's 17 feet by 11 feet. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to break the bank to find a huge printer that prints 11 by 17, or maybe like find some billboard person, although that would be amazing. Wouldn't that be amazing to have a drawing that's 17 feet long? I think I need to make that in my lifetime. But for now, what we're going to imagine is that this is being printed at a scale. So when you print it at in an 11 by 17 paper, or when you put it on the mirror board, which is also 11 by 17 units, what is the scale of this drawing? It's 1 inch equals
1 foot.
is 1 foot, right? Basically. And that's the gist of scaling, is that there's some real measure which then gets made equivalent to something else. Now, the way that I want you to work with producing these 11 by 17 drawings is in the Rhino file itself. I want you to make 11 by 17 rectangles, which then allow you to put in the work. Now, this work is not fitting well, so I'm going to reduce it so that it fits properly, right? And then the window allows me to also choose the window that I print when I make my 11 by 17 PDFs. Does that make sense to everyone? But I don't want to see this line because it's going to give me an error because it's right on the line. So we're going to use what printing places do, which is do these marks that are outside of the rectangle that you want. Does this make sense to everyone? Okay, so this is how I want you to set up your drawings inside your file. And as 11 by 17 printing ready places where you dump your 2D work once you're finished. And the 2D work that you dump here is going to be more than just one object, because you're now composing the 2D work in this 11 by 17 page. Okay? And then this gray thing that you see here is from the print window. This is the window, right? So you're going to print from this window, you're going to do vector output, and then you're going to get these lovely lines. And this difference between the cut line and the not cut line, that's the thing that you need to practice for this next time around. The other thing that I want you to do is when you bring the PDF into Illustrator, you are there's a line that you can. There's a line in here that you can select the square that is making the white in the PDF, and you can erase it. At which point you don't have a white background for your PDF that you brought into Illustrator. You just have the line work. And because you have the line work, now you have the ability to put a texture behind it. Super important that, and the layers in Illustrator are also there. See how layer 3 is all the way down here? So the layers that have texture have to be below the layers that have lines. Does that make sense to everyone? because that way the line work is always on top of the texture. So the priority is that the line work is super sharp. That's the first priority. I don't actually care, how much background images you put in for now. It's something fun that you can do, but the most important thing is that those are vector lines, those are really sharp lines, and those are organized lines by layer. And then finally, the other addition thing that you can do in terms of making your line work boards is you can add actual shapes that can have transparency, and they can start mixing with things that are underneath. These really sharp lines that we have here. That's the goal. So this is Sunday's work, is to have some make 2D work that is going to give you these sharp lines. Does that make sense?